Since childhood, have been reading these stories of Panchtantra. But how did Panchtantra come about? That is something which is so interesting that I've come to see. So, Vishnu Sharma, a celebrated teacher living in Mahila Ropia. Now, he got his fame at the age of 80 when he undertook to educate a very stubborn and unmanageable princess in 6 months in the art of governance. In Panchtantra, the stories are used as teaching aids, and it's Chandra Rajan, the translator, an erudite Sanskrit and English scholar, has translated the text from Sanskrit. In the foreword, she writes, and I quote, tradition ascribes this fabulous work to Vishnu Sharma. Now, this teacher, Vishnu Sharma, Brahmin, had the imagination and artistry to first shape a floating body of tales, tales that were popular tales, moral tales, folk tales, fairy tales, into an artistic whole with a complex and unique structure for a well defined purpose, and the purpose was to instruct these princes. She writes in the foreword, Chandrarajan, what's in a name? She talks about the names also. One might ask a great deal if they are the names of the delightful characters in the Panchtantra. She says that nearly all the names in this work are descriptive of some essential trait, physical or otherwise, of the characters. For example, Pengalaka, means tawny. The lion in the frame story of Book 1 is so named because of the reddish brown coat of lions. And another lion is named Mandamati, which means dimwit. That is the dimwit and the hare, because he meets his end on account of his stupidity, etc. The choice of names is deliberate, as in some of the novels of Thomasari, and this adds to the total meaning of the story. Now, you find a lot of dharam and niti in this Panchtantra. They are two all embracing words that cannot be translated by a single English word. Chandrarajan writes, and I quote, where the word occurs, I have translated dharma as a law, the moral law of the universe, in its physical and ethical aspects, which implies the existence of order at all levels. And niti, she writes, I have rendered by the phrase living wisely and well in the truest sense of these terms. Talking about the jacket design, she thanks Naseem Akhtar, the keeper of manuscripts section, the National Museum, New Delhi, for showing her the manuscript in the Arabic script dating 1491 AD of the original Kalia wa Dinna, and for arranging to provide the slide for the jacket design. So she says it's a reproduction of an illustration in the manuscript copy of the original Kalila wa Dimna, the Arabic version of the Panchtantra, done in Iran in AD 876. The illustration is from the frame story of Book 3 of the Panchtantra of Crows and Owls. It depicts beautifully the tree fortress of the crows on one side of the mountain fortress, of the owls on the other in the distance. So, if you in the introduction, she writes that Vishnu Sharma, having delved into all texts pertaining to matters of polity and worldly wisdom, and having pondered over the file of the matters dealt in them, composed Panchtantra, Panch 5, 5 books of delectable stories. The estrangement of friends is the one. Second is winning of friends. Third is crows and owls. Fourth is loss of uh, gains, and then rash deeds. With the aid of these tales, he instructed the princes. The story goes on that in the city of Mahilarupya, a great king, Amara Sakti, lived and ruled. He had three sons. They were supreme ignoramuses: Vasu Sakti, Ugra Sakti, and Ananta Sakti. He was so concerned about their future that he voiced this in his court in front of his ministers. And he said, it's not aptly said, there's a verse, far better that a man have no sons born, or that born they die, though there be grief, it passes soon. But to have living sons who turn out fools, and obstinate fools at that, indeed, is a lifelong misery to bear. So that's what he quotes. So one minister by the name of Good Sense suggested the 80-year-old Brahmin's name, Vishnu Sharma. Vishnu Sharma was summoned. He came to the court and he astonished the king by his confident claim that in 6 months' time, he said that the dim witted son of his will possess unsurpassed knowledge of practical wisdom. The royal pupils learned through his stories and in 6 months had a complete mastery over all the wide expanse of political and practical wisdom, it is said. Since then, this work on wise conduct, that is Niti Shastra, has become celebrated as an excellent means of awakening young minds. It has traveled far and wide over the earth. Suffice it is to say, whoever always reads his work, whoever listens to it told, he will never face defeat, not even from the Lord of gods himself. So that is the preamble of his work. Now, storytelling has its origin in pre-literature societies of the distant part where it was a communal activity. What makes Panchtantra a unique work and fascinating to study is the intricacy of its structure, the art and artistry with which the tales are interwoven with the discourses, the skillful blend of narrative and dialogue with maxim and percept, that is, example and percept. The overarching frame in which the tales are given, tales and everything else, the way it is set is remarkable. Another interesting feature of this very ancient work is the presence of a dual perspective, entertainment and edification, and an element of inconclusiveness in Book 1, which takes up almost half of the text, further adds to its literary merits. And besides as being entertaining and instructive work of fiction, it has a great influence on world literature as no other work of Indian literature has had. After MacDonald points to its extraordinary influence on the narrative works um, of the whole Middle Ages in Europe, he says, two works that display an unmistakable and notable influence of the Panchtantra, they would be the Arabian Nights and La Fontaine's fables. Like the epic, the Mahabharata, the Panchtantra belongs to the rich, age old oral literature of India. Even after it was committed to writing, the work retains some of the characteristics of its origin as an oral text. So, phrases like this are found, like as it is told, as we have heard, that's how the story. And then he said, so what a visionary Vishnu Sharma was. The work represents society at many levels, but it does more, and it does in a highly self conscious manner. It holds a mirror to the society. The tales, the tales entertainment are entertainment, pure and simple, and an important part of the aim of the work is that. And the second is edification or instruction is equally important. Education is the art of living wisely and well. Niti is one of its aim. And as I said, what is Niti? She writes is uh, living wisely well in the truest sense of the term. So when you go through this, I mean, if I just read something from here, so much to say, so much to read that. So even if you look at the three princes who are the first of the many audiences that the Panchtantra had addressed itself to, would have listened carefully to the epilogue, for it contains the final words, the advice that the first narrator or the storyteller leaves his audience with. Questions would have been raised in their minds as they have been in ours, disturbing questions pointing the way to several possibilities that have been suggested. If at this point we carefully look at the words spoken by Vishnu Sharma to the king at the start of the work, we are on to something significant. So, of course, when he made that tall claim of 6 months, that shows that it was his entire work was not a 6 months doing. He had really uh, collected that knowledge into that, into a into a uh, com- comprehensible text, so to speak. So he was confident. It was not an idle boast when Vishnu Sharma said that he would get them to be responsible citizens or even responsible kings later on. So if you see that it was his hard work, the work that he had gathered throughout his growing years that he put into Panchtantra. And that was there. He felt that mere learning by rote and spending 12 years and finding out things, that's what they said will take time to learn. He felt that it is important to awaken the intelligence. That is his objective. And today we are veering to that. So he had to educate the princes to fit them for their future high office and all the responsibilities it carries. They had to become wise rulers of great kingdoms like their father. And if you read the preamble, she writes in Sanskrit, it opens with the description of King Amara Sakti as a warrior, a scholar, well versed, expert in all branches of polity and economics, and accomplished in all the arts. In short, the king is rounded and versatile man, an ideal ruler. The passage is composed in an ornate and elaborate style with with long compounds that set it apart from the simple narrative and dialogue that follow. So he felt, Vishnu Sharma felt, that He recognized that the princess needed a different system of education which he would provide. His pedagogy is different, it is new. His aim is to teach the prince how to think, not what to think, what is given to think. So it's written in a couplet: with mere book learning, men remain fools. The man who acts using his knowledge, he is wise. So that is why, to fulfill this task of educating the young princess, Vishnu Sarma devised a novel method of instruction which uses life and its varied experiences as the textbook. He presents real life situations and problems in the guise of stories that would arouse and sustain the interest of his pupils while teasing them into thought. It is to be presumed that once the princes had been trained to think and use their minds constructively, they were bound to develop an interest in acquiring knowledge. So many texts are referred to and quoted from in the tales that any intelligent person would be possessed by a desire to know more about them and get to read them. It is all a matter of using the right method and opening windows to an intelligent person. So, in a deep sense, storytelling is theater, with one man or woman playing several roles. The young princes watch how the characters in the tales, both human and non human, think, feel, and act in situations, many of which would be similar to situations that they would find themselves in or at one time or another as rulers. So he makes them see that, and they see how they should or should not act when faced by problems arising in their public and private lives. The motivations of those who surround princes, the ministers, retainers, attendants, parasites, and family, are laid bare. As men and women from all walks of life pass before their mind's eye, the prince the princes also acquire a knowledge of the conduct and actions of ordinary people, which is their, which would the ordinary people, which would be their ordinary, which would be their future subjects. So, as the frame story of the book one, which begins the storytelling session, is a set in Mahilaroka, their own city and their father's capital. It is a familiar scene and yet not quite familiar because it is distanced from their world by being placed in another time, a storybook time. The city is described in a passage that sets it apart from the narrative following by the use of the ornate style with long compounds and a passive construction that we have already noted. And so, of course, Panchtantra is not strictly theatre in the technical sense as it is generally defined and accepted. There are differences between formal theatre and the kind of theatre involved in the technique and the practice of storytelling. So it goes on. Panchtantra deploys a vast variety of characters drawn from high life and low, town and country, and human world, and also brings within its ambit a whole new world, the world of nature, and its own hierarchy of high and low, strong and weak, predator and prey. In both respects, the Panchtantra is like the Indian epic with which it has a strong and close kinship. So, the Panchtantra presents two worlds, one mirroring the other. We cannot see ourselves as we really are truly and completely, except in a mirror as a reflection, flattering ourselves. We have to stand back to look at ourselves, our conduct, and our actions. Since we get overly involved in daily motivations of living, we do not always see a pattern and meaning in events and circumstances until we view it presented before us. And what is more, we see and understand it better when they are presented as happening elsewhere to others. And this, the Panch Tantra does very effectively. The two worlds, human and non human, dialogue with each other or comment on each other. And in addition to these two worlds, Book 5 introduces a third, a twilight world where elements of magic and dream, illusion of the grotesque and the macabre are present to create a tone and atmosphere different from that of the other books, inhabiting the blurred landscape between reality and fantasy. The twilight world also holds up a mirror, a distorting one that is disturbing. Dreams crumble or turn into nightmares. The narrative of Panchtantra moves constantly back and forth from one world to another. The framed story of book one, see, they are book fives, right? We just spoke um, before, as I said in the contents. But book one is estrangement of friends. Book two is winning of friends. Third is of crows and owls. And then you have loss and gains is book and loss of gains. And book five is rash deeds. Again, I just repeated that. So all of that relationships between the two worlds are established by means of certain links. The social and political organization they have in common is notable as link. There is a court in the forest with a king and a hierarchy of office and duties. The four circles of the four circles or mandalas are the circles, it is said, speak speaks the narrator in any city or capital or any sort of community or people. There can be only one occupant of the lion's post. The lion's post is the seat of sovereignty surrounded by the other three circles or mandalas or order of hierarchy in a state. What there is not quite clear. The three orders could be ministers, courtiers, or retainers, and attendants or menials. Or they could stand for court, city, and country. The passage cited clearly draws an analogy between the human community and the natural community in the forest. Like, for example, the court of Pingalaka, that's Tawny, that is Tawny Lion, the king of the forest, is like any other royal court. It is paramount state with ministers and other who are in his, that is the king's secret councils, a royal retinue, assembly. Once acclaimed in the open assembly as, behold, here is a man of merit, etc. You must read that. Another link between the two worlds and their societies is effected through projection. Human beings tend to project their own emotions or the lack of it on the world of nature, to attribute to other forms of life traits of character and behavior and qualities, noble or vicious, good or bad, that are essentially human, and quite mistakenly. This might be a way of entering into a relationship with the other, of escaping from a solipsist word, solipsist, solipsist world, into an exploration of a different world. Expressions as brave as a lion, mean as a jackal, wise as an owl, vicious as a snake come to mind. The tales of Panchtantra belie such confident and complacent assumptions that human beings make often wrongly. The people of woods and waters are not quite like us. But the point that the Panchtantra tales make is that they are people. Tawny, when he is first introduced to us in frame story of book one, is presented of as standing frozen in his tracks, shaken and deeply troubled at heart on hearing the tremendous bellowing of Lively the bull. The King of Owls, Book 3, is scarcely wise. The snake one, the grateful beast and the ungrateful man, is not vicious, but actually grateful, wise, and helpful. The non human characters in the Panchtantra merely appear to be creatures of the world of nature, woods and waters and hills. In fact, they are human actors wearing masks. The masks are fairly transparent. They have to be for the text to fulfill the objectives it has set itself, that is, education in the broadest sense of the term. The text exploits human perceptions of the non human world, sometimes correct and frequently wrong, together with certain superficial similarities in behavior. An animal reacts to something unusual like a sudden sound. It may be a light rustling or deafening bellowing to become alert and wary, as Tawny does when he hears, lively, letting out thundering peals of sheer delight to make identification of us with the other possible. So, the world of nature functions as a metaphor for the human world. It is the basic image in the text and is employed consistently to sustain and convey the message. The natural world wears two faces: the jungle, where nature is red in tooth and claw, and each one looks out for himself, and the community. So, one is the jungle, the second is the community, where coexistence prevails, and each looks out for the other, as in the frame of story of book 2. So, the stories are not about animals and their behavior, their ways of bonding or banding together or for their fighting. This is not to say that there is not close observation of animals and other non human forms of life, for there is. And there is ample evidence in the stories of the understanding of the sympathy for them that flows out of close observation. It forms part of the characterizations of these extraordinary creatures and accounts for the charm of Panchtantra tales. But the main purpose of the work, or rather, it's the main purpose is something else. It is to inculcate niti in the young princes and in order to come after them. So, what is niti? That is practical wisdom. The natural world is human society transposed and thereby distanced. So, not for a single moment is the reader permitted to forget that this fabulous work by Vishnu Sharma is all about human beings, about human society and political organization, about human virtues, vice, and foibles. It points to the nobility in man and to his baseness, to the heights he can scale and the depths to which he falls. The text sets up prominent signposts at various points in the narrative to remind us of this. So, when you read the text now with this in mind, you'll enjoy the tales even better. So, talking animals and birds are present in Indian literature from earliest times, even in the Rig Veda, etc. It's written. So, Panchtantra is even handed in its criticism of the conduct and motives of people, merchants, tradesmen, monks, scholars, judges, the husbands and deceitful wives, the gluttonous or the feckless Brahmanas, and the cruel hunter, the rash and imprudent, and the cold and calculating. Everyone gets a fair share of criticism. Another word is you, uxorious. Okay. Then fools and knaves, the two trusting and conniving persons, are castigated equally sharply. The pompous and the garrulous are held up to ridicule. Princes and women, however, come in from some trenchant criticism, perhaps only apparently. There is a long and sharply worded diatribe against women in general. But the effect of this passionate castigation, I mean, it is there through the characters, the animal characters throughout. A piece of moral criticism depends for its efficacy on who the speaker is and what kind of a person he or she is. As against this outburst, um, so I mean, and she goes on to write, never put your trust in creatures with, I mean, it's in the Panchtantra, it's written, never put your trust in creatures with horns or claws, men who bear arms, women flowing streams, and who whole cursed lot of princes, says Mary. For princes are like serpents, formed coil upon coil, encased in smooth, sinuous scales, cruel, tortuous in movement, menacingly fierce, savage. Satire is perhaps too strong a word to use for the kind of corrective criticism we find in Panchtantra. Education might be a more appropriate term, for education includes both instruction and correction. The Panchtantra is distinguished by two features, which is it, which it is important to note. First, it does not set up impractical ideals for men and women in a social and political context. Its main concern and the thrust of the work is to lay out the way of niti. Niti means living wisely and well in the truest sense of these two terms, through story and percept. Second, the conception of niti is based on and articulates a very uh, what do you say? Central and fundamental concept of Indian thought. So it is the it is dharma, artha, kama. That is, this is the threefold existential scheme that provides the philosophical structure for the Panchtantra. Dharma has several meanings: a law, righteousness, duty, moral, and social order, the inherent property or quality of a thing. Artha signifies the economy, all material resources and their management, and Kama is desire in the broadest sense of the term, and will. The three terms embrace the whole of an individual's life: the ethical and social, the material and economic, and the emotional dimensions. A fourth goal, that is moksha, that is release or ultimate freedom from all worldly concerns and pursuits, was posited, added at some later stage in the evolution of philosophical thought. But though this was present as an ultimate goal, it was to come at the end of an individual's life and perhaps not a goal for everyone except in an academic sense. In Panchtantra, only one tale presents moksha, the tale of turtle doves. To outline these three aims of existence, then how it's done through the stories, how the principle, and then there's something which I found interesting is that the text repeatedly expatiates on the evils of poverty, especially in books 2 and 5. Ha ha, a plague upon his poverty, says Goldie, the mole when he had been deprived of all his wealth by the two monks, etc. The ills of poverty are put in a telling manner and with wit in this verse. Wit, wit, kindliness, and modesty, sweetness of speech and youthful beauty, liveliness too and vitality, freedom from sorrow and joviality, uprightness, knowledge of sacred texts, the wisdom of the preceptor of the immortals, purity as well of mind and body, respect too for rules of right conduct. All these fine attributes arise in people once their belly pot is full. So only then you can talk about things. First, your belly should be all, it should be away from poverty, your food, clothing, and shelter, etc. But money is not everything. It has no value in itself. It is a means to living wisely and well. It has to be put to good use for oneself and for others. The Panch Tantra does not recommend the uncontrolled pursuit of amassing wealth. The greater part of Book 5 is a criticism of greed. Further, it warns against unprincipled methods of making money. What is earned is to be earned with honor and integrity and used well, giving to others and sharing. So, in the couplets written here is translated here are: you may have only a morsel yourself. Why not give half of it to a suppliant? The poor man can only offer his mite, but the reward he reaps, the Vedas says, is a great is as great as that which the rich gain by their beneficence. Finally, looking at the third goal, desire and will against the punch. Again, the Panch Tantra lays emphasis on the middle way, on moderation and restraint. Excessive desire in all forms is to be curbed. But to be without any desire is to lack success and achievement. The will to act, to achieve the right goals, to yoke all one's powers and abilities to worthwhile enterprises and persevere until success crowns a person's efforts is manliness. To desire the good things of life that are lawful and do not injure others brings happiness, family, friends, good company. Then another couplet translated: those who enjoy happy times, friends with dear friends, lovers with their beloved, joyful with the joyous, only they live life to the fullest. They are the salt of the earth. However, it is friendship that is given a special place and set above all other relationships. It is singled out for high praise as one of the most important requisites for the good life. True friendship is possible only between equals and noble minds who are good and wise, cherished for their learning, their refinement, their discipline. Such friendships, close knits like flesh and claw, difficult to split, are a blessing, opening out trails in life's wilderness. The frame story of Book 2 is a testimony for this true friendship. You can read and find out. The aim of Panchtantra is to inculcate the importance of a harmonious development of all the powers of man, to balance the needs and demands of the individual in society so that the ethical, social, material, and emotional aspects of personality may be integrated and lead to a life that is lived wisely and well in the truest sense of these terms. This is niti. To be free from fear and want is a basic need. Our values are then built on it: giving and receiving, friendship and affection, kindliness and compassion for the needy and distressed, the intelligent use of learning and the rightful use of intelligence, the exercise of judgment and prudence, deliberation before acting, followed by resolute action, giving the best an individual can to succeed in worthwhile enterprises. This is the wisdom conveyed by the Panchtantra, a gentle and practical wisdom. There is no prophetic fervor calling fire and brimstone down on the head of fool and knave. No strident notes are struck. The Panchtantra sets forth a very civilized view of life, a noble way of living, which man can aspire to. To characterize this work as unmoral or amoral has been done at times is to do it gross injustice. And now we shall examine the artistic form in which this noble and civilized view of life and ability of human beings to achieve it, if only they had the will to do so, had been presented by Vishnu Sharma. So, it is So there's a lot more to it. You must go through it. I mean, I found it so interesting. uh, so the Panchtantra is a work known in Sanskrit as Shampoo, written in a mixture of verse and prose. The two forms are used for different and distinctive purposes. Verse is employed for articulating maxims, proverbs, and precepts, and for conveying heightened emotions, prose for narrative and dialogue. A verse always identical comes at the beginning and the end of a tale, thus marking some kind of separation of the tale from the rest of the narrative. It lays out the content of the tale in brief and points out the moral. Generally, the prose is simple and straightforward so as not to detract from the story interest. So occasionally a passage is written in an ornate style with long compounds drawing attention to itself in various ways. So, uh, so Hertel was of the opinion that the original Panchtantra was composed in Kashmir around 200 BC. So, I mean, there are a lot of stories around when it came about. Of course, it is something which is a great thing, a great book, a great tale to understand and to read and to understand. So I'm going to end with this. In the southern land flourished the city known as Parmadrupya, and not too far away grew a lofty banyan tree with mighty trunk and branches, providing a home for all creatures. And it has been said, deer recline in its shade, birds in multitudes gather to roost, darkening its dark green canopy of leaves. Troops of monkeys cling to the trunk, while hollows hum an insect throng. Flowers are boldly kissed by honey bees. Oh, what happiness its every limb showers on assemblages of various creatures. Such a tree deserves all praise, others only burden the earth. That's what I was reading from the Penguin Books. Vishnu Sharma's The Panchtantra, translated from the Sanskrit with an introduction by Chandra, Rajan. Great book.